The razor was still warm when the steward pressed a gleaming Louis d'or into your palm. "Payment," he whispered, "for your silence, not your service." Blood still streaked your ear where the barber's blade had nicked flesh, yet the coin's cold bite felt sharper. All around you, the hall of mirrors glittered with chandeliers fat as beehives, each crystal droplet reflecting 300 versions of your panicked face. Somewhere beyond that blinding brilliance, musicians tuned lutes for tonight's coronation ball, but you heard only the rush of your own pulse, thick, tidal, impossible to hush. You had arrived at Versailles this very dawn to serve as first page to the new regent, yet within minutes the palace had already tried to carve the truth out of your throat. Gold leaf flaked from the doorframe as footmen yanked you into a side corridor heavy with beeswax and sweat. Their gloved fingers bruised like iron cuffs. The older one smelled of cloves, the younger of cheap Paris gin, sickly sweetness that lingered even after they shoved you against a tapestry of Hercules strangling serpents. "Speak," they hissed, "and you'll praise God for losing only an ear." You felt the coin sweat in your fist, its ridged edge cutting crescents into your skin. How many other boys, you wondered, had been bought with the same golden hush? A door slammed. Darkness swallowed you, then bloomed into candle glow. "Strip," ordered Madame de Rèneval, the regent's chief housekeeper, eyes colder than the silver chatelaine jangling at her waist. As you fumbled with wooden toggles, she inspected every bruise the journey from Gascony had painted on your ribs. When she reached the fresh cut below your ear, she tootayed as though you'd chipped a porcelain saucer. "We can't display damaged goods, can we?" She dabbed the wound with brandy-soaked linen. The burn snatched your breath, but you dared not cry out. The hallway beyond crackled with laughter from powdered nobles, and one wrong echo could shatter the illusion that royal life was silk and song. 3 strides away, a gilded birdcage stood empty save for a single white feather. Madame flicked her chin toward it. That is where the last page spent his final night, singing until his voice bled. He forgot the first rule: boys are heard only when commanded. She plucked the feather, twirled it through candlelight. "Do you intend to remember the rule?" "Yes, madam," you whispered, the words tasting like iron filings. She smiled, thin, administrative. "Splendid. Now dress." She handed you a livery of moth-eaten velvet dyed, so violently blue it looked black in the guttering flame. As you pulled on the coat, you felt something crunchy sewn into the lining. A quick pinch produced a tiny square of parchment, brittle and yellowed. Ink scrawled in a child's trembling script. "Find the hollow stair, voices live there." Your pulse spiked. Was this the last page's SOS, stitched in desperation before his final song? Before you could tuck the note away, Madame seized your wrist, eyes narrowing on the scrap. A beat of silence, then distant trumpets announced the regent's entrance, and she released you with a hissed warning. "Tonight you hold the cushion for his crown. Drop it, and you'll share that boy's cage." Her heels clicked off down the corridor. Servants swept you along a maze of passages that smelled of lavender polish overwrought. Painted cherubs on the ceiling seemed to leer, their pastel mouths puckered as if to muffle your scream. One footman jabbed you in the spine. "Forward, cher petit oiseau." Little bird. The words chilled you. Birds were meant to sing until their throats split. In the antechamber, 8 other pages stood rigid, each gripping a silk cushion embossed with fleurs de lis. Their eyes, vacant as wax dolls, refused to meet yours. Somewhere overhead a viol bow screeched, then silenced. Someone was testing how high a tenor could soar before snapping. You swallowed bile and stepped into line, the embroidered pillow suddenly heavier than any musket. Blood from your ear dribbled down your neck, staining the lace collar a darker shade of night. The double doors creaked open. Heat from 1,000 tapers slapped your cheeks. Perfume thickened the air until it felt chewable. You advanced down a carpet woven with golden vines, each step bringing you closer to the throne dais and the man who could doom or deliver you with a flick of his bejeweled fingernail. Guests gasped at your bleeding collar, mistaking it for rouge, fashion's newest whimsy. Laughter frothed. The orchestra struck a triumphant chord, then aborted mid-phrase as someone screamed. A body had toppled from the musician's loft, crimson spreading across harpsichord keys like spilled Cabernet. Gasps ricocheted. The regent rose, powdered wig askew, eyes bulging. Another one? Panic skittered up your spine, another one. How many palace boys had plummeted before the music even began? You clutched your cushion, terror thrumming through every vein. Somewhere behind the curtains, muffled pleas mingled with frantic shuffling, sounds of someone else being silenced before he could name his tormentor. You pivoted, scanning chandeliers for shadows shaped like boys poised to fall. None. Yet from high above, a rhythmic knock echoed, wood on stone, like a code pounded by spirits trapped in the rafters. Your fingers tightened around the parchment hidden in your sleeve. The hollow stair, could it be up there, a secret path weaving through the palace's starved lungs? A gloved hand yanked you forward. The regent's crown, gold alive with rubies, hovered inches above your trembling pillow. As he lifted it, blood dripped from your chin onto the velvet. He followed the drop, eyes narrowing. For one razor-blade instant, you thought he recognized fear, maybe even mercy. But his lips curled in a private smile meant only for you, and he murmured so low the courtiers could never hear. Don't worry, little nightingale. Gold buys new voices every day. The orchestra restarted with savage elegance, drowning your heartbeat in triumphant brass. Yet the rhythmic knocking overhead persisted, syncopating the music like a death rattle muffled beneath a waltz. Each hollow thud begged a question that felt heavier than the crown now perched on regal curls. What price will you pay to make them hear the screams sewn into these velvet walls? A harvest moon leaked pale fire through the arched windows by the time the coronation feast staggered to a close. Guests reeled away in brocade stupors, leaving behind a battlefield of cracked lobster claws, overturned goblets, and crushed macarons that bled pastel guts onto linen. Servants moved like ghosts, sweeping crumbs into silver pans. Somewhere in the distance the court physician pronounced the fallen musician's death an unfortunate fainting spell, and just like that, another name vanished beneath a polished lie. You were herded with the other pages toward the dormitory loft, a vaulted attic that smelled of wet straw and betrayal. As you trudged upstairs, the rhythmic knocking returned, wood on stone, knock knock pause knock. The pattern matched the heart you had tried all evening to slow. Each beat whispered the same dare, find the hollow stair. Inside the loft, narrow cots marched wall to wall. Above each pillow dangled a velvet pouch, tokens from patrons who favored particular boys. Pearls, silk ribbons, even a tiny emerald sparked in the moon glow. Your pouch, newly hung, clinked with a single Louis d'Or, the hush money you'd been paid hours earlier. Gilded silence displayed like a badge of honor. The steward ordered lights out. Pine resin torches hissed, plunging the room into charcoal hush. Yet the knocking persisted, closer now, vibrating the floorboards beneath bare soles. You slipped from your cot. Boards creaked too loudly. A stern whisper sliced the dark. Back to bed. You froze until the steward's footfalls faded down the stairs, then crept again, heart strobing. Toward the far wall a tapestry of Diana the huntress swayed, although no breeze touched it. You pressed your ear, hollow. Fingertips found a slit where frayed weft met worm-eaten beam. You tugged. The tapestry peeled back, revealing a narrow wooden door no higher than your shoulder, iron latch cold as river stone. The knocking ceased, a breathless invitation. Inside, a spiral staircase corkscrewed downward, each step worn slippery by centuries of secret sols. Air smelled of damp lime and candle soot. You descended, counting 13 steps, then a landing damp with condensation, then 13 more. Halfway down, whispers drifted up, raspy, urgent. Must move them before dawn. Another shipment, the regent's orders. Your pulse slammed. You crouched, pressing into shadow as two silhouettes materialized below. One tall, draped in velvet, the other short and stooped. Lantern light revealed the stooped figure's burden. A small crate stamped with a fleur-de-lis burned into its lid. Something inside clinked with a metallic hush. Gold leaf? Coin? Instruments of pain? You held breath until they passed, the taller voice grumbling. If those boys don't learn silence, we'll gild their tongues as warning. Their footsteps faded. You continued downward until the stair disgorged you into a corridor that reeked of tallow and mold. Low arches forced you to hunch. Along the walls, niches yawned like open graves. Some held crates identical to the one you'd seen. Others held burlap sacks that sagged as though packed with wet sand. A muffled sob jerked your gaze left. Behind rusted bars no wider than a musket barrel crouched a boy perhaps 9 years old, wrists bound with ribbon, absurdly delicate restraints digging into raw flesh. Moon-pale eyes met yours, reflecting terror and astonishment. How did you find us?" he whispered, voice cracked like old parchment. "The knocking," you answered, throat tight. "Was that you?" He shook his head. "All of us. We take turns so nobody falls asleep." He tilted his chin. Farther down the corridor silhouettes huddled behind more bars. Half a dozen boys, their faces bruised colors the rainbow forgot. One clutched a makeshift drum, a broken spoon against stone, knock knock pause knock. What are they doing to you? You asked. Training us, he rasped. For the mines. Mines? Versailles has no mines. Not here, he said, eyes flicking toward the crate. In the colonies, the Regent's gold fields in Saint-Domingue. They send us when our voices break or our beauty fades. He swallowed. Some never make the ship. Their bodies fill those sacks. Ice crawled your spine. The sacks of wet sand. The weight of dead children smuggled out under the hush of midnight. Voices silenced by gold, indeed. The boy pressed trembling fingers through the bars, offering a scrap of ribbon. Scarlet, frayed. Give this to Madame de Rèneval, he whispered, and she'll kill you for knowing. A bitter smile flickered. Better, give it to the Regent during morning prayers. Ask if he remembers Étienne, the page who sang Ave Maria while they fixed his chains. Footsteps echoed, the two men returning. No time. You tucked the ribbon inside your cuff and scanned for a latch. The rusty lock mocked your shaking hands. You needed a key, a pry bar, anything. The boy shoved you back. Go. We knock so some ear will listen. Now you've heard. Find help. Tears gleamed on hollow cheeks. Hurry. You fled, heart-punching ribs. Up the spiral you sprinted, lungs lashing. As you burst into the loft, dawn's first blade of light split the rafters. Pages still slept, unaware the darkness beneath their floorboards devoured brothers nightly. You collapsed on your cot, the world seesawing. The steward barged in moments later, ringing a brass bell. Up, little larks. Morning devotions. As the others dressed, you fingered the ribbon in your sleeve, its scarlet thread warm as fresh blood. One question hammered through candle-stiff air. Would you confront the Regent, risking iron chains, or scheme in silence until escape became possible? Either path demanded courage you weren't sure lived inside your shivering bones. Yet somewhere below, spoons tapped stone, knock-knock pause knock, each beat a countdown to someone else's last dawn. And you had just moved from witness to accomplice by merely breathing free air. The coin in your pouch felt heavier than anvils. You realized gold bought not only silence, it bought time. Time for crimes to deepen their roots. Every second you hesitated, another boy's future slipped into a burlap sack. Outside, trumpets blared reveille. The Regent would soon kneel at the palace chapel, smug in powdered grace. Your palm closed around the ribbon, a fuse begging to be lit. What he discovered next might shock everyone, you thought grimly, if you survived long enough to strike the match. Morning devotions began before the frost melted from the marble balustrades, and the chapel smelled of crushed myrtle, candle grease, and last night's wine leaking from noble pores. You filed in with the other pages, velvet slippers whisper slick on the stone, every step rehearsed to perfection. Yet your pulse jackhammered so loud you feared the choir might slip out of key. The Regent knelt at the altar rail in robes the color of dying embers, his powdered wig dusting the air with faint perfume. Gold gleamed everywhere, in the monstrance, the candlesticks, the embroidery coiling up his sleeves like gilded serpents. You could almost taste the metal, hot, bitter, predatory. Inside your cuff the scarlet ribbon burned your wrist, as if the boy below were tugging an invisible leash. Now a voice in your skull urged, "Show him." But the steward lurked 3 pews behind, eyes sharp as awls, and Madame de Rèneval stood near the font, silver chatelaine chiming like a warning bell each time she shifted her weight. One misstep, and you'd never reach the altar, at least not upright. The opening hymn shivered through pointed arches. Pages processed 2 by 2, each bearing a beeswax taper. As you passed the Regent, a shaft of sun speared the stained glass, igniting rubies on his stole. Gold buys new voices every day. His words from last night echoed, foul as cistern water. Your hand shook so violently the flame guttered sideways, licking your knuckles. A choirboy's note cracked, then his body followed. He crumpled, cassock smacking stone, chalice smashing into 100 screaming shards. The congregation gasped, a collective intake scented with panic. Priests surged forward. In that pocket of chaos, you slid the ribbon free. 3 steps, 1 breath. You knelt beside the fallen boy, pretending to help lift him. The Regent leaned over, frowning in benign concern. His prayer book lay open on the rail, vellum glowing cream-soft in the dawn. With a motion quick as a pickpocket's whisper, you tucked the blood-red ribbon between psalms and closed the cover. "Majesty," you said, pitching your voice low, "Étienne sends his regards." The Regent's gaze snapped to you, startled then murderous. A heartbeat later he flipped the book open. Color drained from his powdered cheeks as the ribbon unfurled like a line of fresh arterial blood. Before he could speak, Madame de Rèneval's hand clamped your shoulder. "Thief," she barked. He steals from his grace's own devotions. The accusation rang false, yet her tone carried the weight of a verdict already etched in stone. Guards advanced, halberds glinting. You yanked free, adrenaline turning limbs to lightning. The fallen choirboy groaned, alive, thankfully, while nobles shrieked in confusion. You bolted down the side aisle, skidding on spilled wine, ricocheting off a marble saint's thigh. Armor clattered behind you, human thunder rolling closer. A side door loomed, half ajar for ventilation. You plunged through, entering a service corridor that smelled of starch and rat droppings. Boots hammered after you, echoes multiplying like demons. At the first junction you veered left, down, always down, remembering the spiral hidden beneath Diana's tapestry. If you could reach the hollow stair, you could vanish into the warren below and find the captive boys before anyone realized you'd slipped their net. But the palace was a living labyrinth. Corridors twisted, doubling back, stairways ended in bricked-up arches. Panic clawed higher in your throat. At a dead end hung a faded portrait of a queen no tutor bothered to name. In desperation you pressed the frame, and it swiveled, revealing a gap just wide enough for your torso. A servant's escape hatch, long forgotten. You wriggled through, scraping velvet and skin, then tumbled into darkness scented with wet earth. The panel thunked shut behind you. Outside, guards thundered past, curses fading. You lay panting on a slanted plank floor. Far overhead, water dripped in methodical ticks. When your eyes adjusted, you saw you'd landed in a gallery of abandoned props, broken harps, cracked marble urns, a dismembered automaton still clutching a tarnished trumpet. Dust coated everything like grave ash. But there, against the far wall, a narrow ladder climbed into shadow. Its rungs bore the same worm-holed oak as the secret stair. Clambering up, you emerged onto the familiar landing of the spiral. Knock knock pause knock greeted you, urgent, frantic. You whispered through the bars, "Hold on, I'm back." Small fingers brushed yours, desperate sparks in the dark. The rusty lock resisted until your bleeding knuckles finally coaxed it with a loose screw pried from the ladder. Hinges squealed, but no footsteps stirred. The guards were still scouring wrong corridors. One by one, boys slipped out, ankles wobbling, eyes wide with disbelief. The youngest, barely 6, clung to your sleeve like a shipwreck survivor clutching driftwood. Footfalls thundered above. Closer this time, they'd doubled back. No more stealth. You herded the boys up the spiral, breath ragged, mind skimming escape maps you'd never studied. At the loft door you paused. The steward's voice drifted inside, counting heads for morning drills. If he turned, you were finished. A plan struck, wild, but breath left to risk? None. You pushed the smallest boy forward. "Start the knocking," you hissed. He picked up the spoon, smacked wood, knock knock pause knock, but now above, 40 pages echoed the rhythm with fists on bedsteads, a rolling thunder of defiance shaking rafters. The steward barked for silence. The boys only hammered harder, their rebellion feeding on itself. Confusion exploded, orders tangled, the older pages toppled wash basins, flooding the floor. You hustled the freed captives across the loft, through the tapestry portal, and down another passage leading to the stables. Outside, dawn blazed full force, sky the bruised purple of a healing wound. Grooms shrieked as you commandeered the first wagon hitched, crates of champagne destined for the regent's luncheon. You heaved boys among the bottles, tossed straw over their heads. Another coin of silence, you thought grimly, this time paying for freedom, not misery. Cracking the reins, you rumbled toward the rear gate. For guards lurched into view, weapons half raised. But the steward burst from a door behind them, roaring, "Back to the chapel, riot in the loft." The distraction split the detail. You rolled through the postern while chaos bloomed behind. The road to Paris opened like a promise, fog-draped, uncertain, but away. As hoofbeats pounded, you counted living heads among straw, 6, 7, 8. All breathing, all staring at you with mixtures of terror and dawning hope. Yet Versailles was not done. A trumpet bellowed, riders thundered in pursuit, pennants whipping like angry tongues. The regent would not relinquish voices forged by gold without a hunt. You snapped the reins harder, wagon rattling like bones in a drum. Ahead, the Seine's morning mist curled, offering either escape or drowning. Your heart slammed a single oath, no more cages. Not ever. Behind, the first musket crack split the air. Musket smoke clawed after you, acrid and gray, but adrenaline burned hotter than fear. The champagne crates clinked like jealous bells as the wagon bucked over ruts. Bubbles frothed from shattered bottles, making the floorboards slick with sticky gold fizz. One boy, Nicholas, you'd learned, pressed his palms to his ears each time a shot cracked, whispering numbers as though reciting saints' names might ward off lead. You risked a glance back. 3 horsemen pounded the road, livery flashing scarlet and sable, the regent's personal guard. Their maras foamed at the mouth, hooves striking sparks from flint cobbles. A sergeant rose in his stirrups, leveled his firelock. You jerked the reins, left, then sharp right, just as flash and thunder erupted. A bullet shrieked past, kissing the wagon's hoop iron. Oak splintered in a fountain of needles. Ahead, the Seine's morning mist thinned, revealing a low wooden pontoon bridge. It sagged under its own weight, planks warped by winter floods. No other crossing lay within miles. Stone bridges were for noble coaches, not fish carts. You'd gamble rotten timbers over certain capture. "Hold fast," you cried. Boys braced, eyes saucer-wide. The wagon hit the first plank with a crack like splitting ribs. Boards bounced, nails screaming from sockets. Halfway across, one rear wheel punched through. The whole rig lurched, pitching champagne and children to starboard. You whipped the mules, cursing every saint in Christendom. With a groan the wheel clawed free, and the wagon clattered onto the far bank, just as the bridge behind you buckled under the weight of galloping horses. Hooves scrabbled. Timber snapped. Water roared. 2 guards and their mounts plunged into the Seine, arms windmilling. The sergeant reined hard, careening to a halt on the collapsing span, eyes wide with disbelief as the river swallowed comrades and boards alike. He dismounted, drew pistol, but you were already thundering up an embankment road that arrowed toward Paris, leaving him cursing at the sky. By mid-morning you reached the first tangle of slums outside the city gates, rutted lanes squeezed between tanneries and dye pits. The mules wheezed, coats frosted with sweat crystals, boys shivered behind crates, teeth clicking a nervous waltz. You veered into a courtyard hemmed by sagging warehouses, brakes squealing. A woman in grease-stained trousers emerged from a doorway, wiping soot from her brow. One glimpse of haggard pages and smashed bottles, and she barked a laugh. Either the regent's throwing a new kind of party, or you're in trouble deeper than cesspools. You dismounted, heart drumming a dirge. "Name's Pierre Lafitte." You lied on instinct. "Our cart was hijacked on way to the Polaroil. Can we rent a stall to repair the wheel?" She eyed the boys, torn velvet, ribbon welts, terror undisguised. Her gaze softened. "I'm Maman Lizette. This warehouse fronts my traveling troupe, les flammes diminuent. Lamplighters by night, acrobats by day, and occasional smugglers when rent comes due." She grinned, a knife's flash of teeth. "You look like stage urchins cast in the wrong tragedy. Bring them inside." Within the cavernous interior, jugglers practiced with flaming torches while seamstresses stitched sequins onto tattered silks. The air smelled of beeswax, sweat, and fried garlic. Lizette led you to a corner curtained by tarps. "Rest here. No gendarmes tread my boards unless they pay admission." She produced a flask. "Quince brandy, warms better than sermons." You accepted, throat blazing at the swallow. Boys sipped watered portions, color creeping back into wan cheeks. One Marcel traced calloused fingers over a juggler's chainsaw, murmuring, "Sharper than their blades." You realized these children had never handled anything more dangerous than a serving tray, yet danger had handled them every night. Lizette crouched, assessing their bruises. "Who hurt you?" "Gold did," Nicholas whispered. Others nodded, lips sealed by trauma's solder. Lizette looked to you. You told her everything, the hollow stare, the cages, the ribbon, the chase, words spilling like nails from a split barrel. Her face hardened. "The regent's filth reaches farther than even the river's stench. You've shamed a viper. He'll strike until your story lies headless. I need passage for them, anywhere beyond his reach. Marseille perhaps, then a ship to Boston or Barbados." "Ships cost coin none of us carry," she said. "But tonight we perform in the Marquis de Innocence. Crowds thick as lice on mongrel backs, perfect smoke to disappear under. After the finale, my troupe moves south along the Loire. We'll smuggle the boys piecemeal in costume trunks. As for you, monsieur, the regent wants your head most." You exhaled, the breath of a man foreseeing gallows. "I'll stay behind, draw his dogs." Nicholas clutched your sleeve. "Don't leave us." 8 pairs of eyes begged the same. Each was a promise you'd made on rattling planks and musket thunder. Abandoning them felt like selling silence all over again. Lizette tapped a torch stick against her palm, thinking, "There is one way. Participate in our finale, Danse de la Mort. Masked performers, face paint thick as plaster. You'll vanish beneath grease paint, then slip away with the prop wagons at midnight." a plan beating with theatrical madness, yet hope often wore motley when courts wore crowns. You nodded. Show me the steps. Dusk draped Paris in singed velvet as Les Flammes diminuate erected a makeshift stage. Crowds surged, fishwives, cutpurses, infantry deserters, all hungry for spectacle. Lanterns threw feverish light onto painted canvases, skeletons courting brides, kings embracing coffins. The boys, scrubbed and costumed as cherubic spirits, hid in plain sight, tinkling finger cymbals. You wore a grinning skull mask, black cloak swirling. Beneath grease paint your pulse hammered choreographic terror. Somewhere in the mob might lurk the regent's spies, Madame de Rèneval herself cloaked in citizen rags, or that sergeant who'd watched comrades drown. Every violin scrape felt like a musket cocked behind your ribs. The show began. Jugglers tossed fire, acrobats somersaulted through hoops of sparks. At midpoint, Lisette strode forth as death, scythe glittering, voice booming. Gold tempts kings, but death gilds none. On that cue, you and the cherubs danced a circle around her, ribbons fluttering like spilled blood. Mid-spin, your eyes snagged on a silhouette at stall's edge, powdered wig under a hood, silver chatelaine flashing. Rèneval. She whispered to two constables, pointing straight at the stage. Lisette caught your panic-flared eyes, red danger. She bellowed, dance finale. Musicians slammed into a frenetic jig. Smoke pots erupted, spilling crimson clouds that swallowed the platform. Through choking haze she shoved boys toward the prop wagons. You leapt after them. Rèneval shouted, voice muffled by coughing spectators. Constables surged, but fire-breathers exhaled plumes that forced them back. Sparks rained, screams folded into applause. Half the crowd believed it scripted mayhem. You ducked beneath the stage, crawling through sawdust to the wagons. Inside, boys already hid beneath festival banners. Lisette thrust a burlap sack into your hands. Coins. Not gold enough for kings, but enough for Marseille. She gripped your skull mask. Leave it on till the Rhone. Hooves clattered, the driver cracked reins. The wagon lurched, wheels crunching market refuse. Behind, Rèneval's shriek cut the night, part fury, part disbelief. Then distance and throng noise swallowed her voice. As Paris lamps dwindled, Nicholas whispered, "Will we be free now?" You leaned back against crates scented of grease paint and garlic, mask grinning into darkness. "Not yet," you answered, but felt something you hadn't since stepping into Versailles, a breath that didn't taste like chains. The road south swept under wheels, each mile unwinding the regent's reach. Above, a hunter's moon rode high, silvered like unminted mercy. Somewhere ahead waited seawater salter than tears, and ships whose hulls had never heard a palace boy scream. You vowed those planks would carry laughter instead. But dawn was still far, pursuit rides even farther. Behind every bend might lurk a halberd's glint or a coin's quiet threat. You tightened your cloak and whispered to the wheels, faster. Free men seldom count their heartbeats, but you tallied every thump until sunrise stained the wagon's ochre and the lure's morning fog unfurled like parchment before an unwritten fate. For one fragile hour the world resembled an ordinary countryside, frost-silvered vineyards, chimneys coughing wood smoke, roosters bragging to a timid sun. Yet even the dew smelled of pursuit, horse sweat, powder, and the coppery promise of shackles. Lisette's caravan rattled into the riverside hamlet of Candes, wheels squealing protest. Her troop knew the drill: erect a striped canvas, strike up a hurdy-gurdy, and become indispensable before anyone asked for papers. While jugglers feigned merriment, you hustled the 8 boys into a ramshackle boathouse that creaked with tide breath and smelled of tar, salt, and old fish guts. A skiff bobbed inside, hull patched more times than a beggar's cloak. "Tonight," Lisette whispered, eyes bright as broken glass, "current will carry you 5 leagues to the Abbey Pier. From there a farmer's cart takes you through the Vade forests. At La Rochelle, my cousin keeps a coop of false passports and a bribe-hungry captain bound for the Carolinas. Stay low. Trust shadows." You nodded, jaw clenched. Shadows were old friends by now, cold-fingered, reliable. Still, an ache bloomed under your ribs at the thought of parting from Lisette's ragged sanctuary of torchlight and brass laughter. She clasped your wrist, pressing a sliver of hand mirror into your palm. "Signal us if soldiers appear, sunflash 3 times. We'll set half the town on fire before they touch those boys." Outside, Nicholas traced the boat's battered gunwale, voice trembling with wonder. "Does the ocean smell like freedom, or just more salt?" You crouched beside him, tightening a frayed rope. "Freedom stinks," you said, "of sweat, fear, and rotten fish, until the moment it doesn't. Then it smells like whatever wind is in your face." A clatter erupted near the market square, hoofbeats on cobbles issuing from the direction you'd come. Reflex drove you flat against a piling. Through warped slats you glimpsed 5 dragoons dismounting, sabers glinting, uniforms dust gray from hard riding. They unfurled a parchment emblazoned with the regent's seal and nailed it to a post. Reward for the capture of runaways, traitorous usurper known as Pierre Lafitte, presumed armed, children abducted. A woodcut sketch showed your face, exaggerated jawline, eyes too brave by half. Lisette sidled in, breath sharp. We've hours, not days. She peered at the poster, snorted. They think you're armed? Let's correct them. From her bodice she extracted a stiletto thin as a knitting needle, its handle worn smooth by desperate palms. She tucked it into the sash of your costume cloak. Steel sings louder than gold when well placed. Mid-afternoon, dragoons began questioning townsfolk. A tanner pointed upstream, bluff or betrayal, who could say. You herded boys into the skiff, hearts hammering like mallets on skin drums. Marcel manned the tiller. Nicholas hugged a satchel stuffed with bread, apples and Lizette's coin purse. The youngest, Remy, straddled the prow, eyes huge beneath a stolen acrobat's cap. You shoved off as sunset bled vermilion into the water. The lure seized the hull with icy claws, spinning you into current quick as rumor. River reeds whispered secrets you prayed were blessings. On shore, Lisette twirled a flaming baton in farewell, sparks spiraling like promises into dusk. For an hour only oar splash and nervous breathing accompanied the creak of wood. Then a far-off horn yowled, wolf-like, triumphant. Torches bobbed along the river road, too many to be hunters. Dragoons. A lantern blinked 3 slow pulses from high bank to low. The soldiers had allies tracking both banks. Panic rippled through the skiff. You gripped the stiletto, blade moonbright. Quiet paddles, hug the shadows, you hissed. Marcel angled toward a stand of willow that drooped into the water. Branches shredded starlight into confetti as you slipped beneath the leafy curtain. Boys ducked, and the skiff became a floating coffin of silence. Torches flared nearer, oaths carried over water. One rider dismounted, crunching reed beds perhaps 30 paces away. You heard the rasp of flint on steel, then smelled sulfur. They were lighting pitch balls to hurl into the dark. A fiery orb arced overhead, hissing as it smashed the river 20 feet downstream, boiling water into snarling steam. Remy whimpered. You clamped a hand over his mouth and felt his tears hot on your fingers. Another flame ball sizzled closer. The next might find you. Mind sprinting, you recalled the champagne crates, glass litter still stowed in a burlap sack. You rummaged, fingers closing on a fat bottle half full of flat bubbly. With a whispered prayer to whatever patron saint defends lunacy, you uncorked it, wadded a strip of cloth, and dipped. Nicholas sparked flint to tinder, the rag roared to life. Riverwind slapped the flame, but it held. On 3, you breathed, muscles tensing. 1, 2. You hurled the bottle high toward an eddy upriver. It struck rock, exploded in a blossom of fire and fizz. Dragoons yelled, horses reared. In seconds torches veered toward the blaze, men plunging into reeds after phantom rebels. Marcel seized the moment, rowing with every ounce of orphan fury. Water sliced past, black glass quick. You shot out from willow shade, arrowing downstream before dragoons regrouped. In the chaos, no one noticed your departure except the lawyer, who swallowed your ripples hungrily. Hours blurred, moon path shimmering, muscles screaming, boys nodding between terror and exhaustion. At last the outline of an ancient pier speared into view, timbers crooked as gravestones. Beyond, the ruins of an abbey loomed, half devoured by ivy, stones echoing with prayers history forgot. You beached the skiff in muck fragrant with rot and river lilies. Limbs numb, you shepherded boys onto the pier. A lantern winked twice near the cloister gate, your farmer contact. Safe for now. But as you stepped onto the planks, a voice slithered from shadow. Pierre Lafitte, it purred. Or perhaps another name you prefer? Madame de Rèneval emerged, cloak blacker than midnight, silver chatelaine chiming funeral notes. 2 pistoliers flanked her, muzzles leveled at your ribs. She smiled, thin, triumphant. Gold buys voices, yes, but it also buys maps, informants, and river pilots. She flicked gaze over shivering boys. Return my property, and I'll spare most of your fingers. Heat blazed behind your eyes, rage hotter than fear ever burned. You stepped forward, stiletto glinting. Come claim them, madam. Rèneval's pistol cocked. A child-stealing stage clown threatens me? She laughed, rich, vicious. I molded these urchins for courts and coffers. You're nothing but their next coffin. She raised the gun. Time rippled, slow as honey. You saw every detail. Hammer back, sparks bloom, boys' faces frozen. And then Nicholas hurled his apple sack. It struck Rèneval's wrist. The pistol barked skyward, bullet shrieking into stone. Remy darted, biting a guard's thigh. The man howled, trigger slackened. Chaos spilled across the pier. You lunged, dagger flashing. Steel met flesh. Rèneval screamed, clutching a crimson sleeve. You parried a guard's saber with your puny blade, ducked low, and he tumbled over your back into water dark as sin. The second guard fired, muzzle flash seared night. Pain tore your shoulder, fire-licking bone, but fury drowned it. You slashed, the guard staggered, dropped. Rèneval staggered too, eyes glassy. Blood blossomed between jeweled fingers. She hissed, "You'll never outrun him. The Regent's reach is the horizon." She tottered, slipping on moss, then plunged off the pier with a splash swallowed fast by swirling black. Silence fell, broken only by wind, the river's steady breathe, and your ragged panting. Boys stared wide-eyed, half horrified, half exultant. Nicholas stepped to your wounded side, voice small. "Does freedom still stink?" You managed a grin through teeth-bared pain. Like smoke in victory. Behind the abbey wall, the farmer whistled, impatient urgency. Dawn's first bruised light seeped above treetops. You wrapped torn cloak around your bleeding shoulder, gathered the boys, and limped toward the cart that would carry you into forests thick enough to swallow even royal shadows. The horizon was still far, but for the first time, it felt like yours to chase. Mist feathered the Vade forests, soft as lullabies, yet every time an owl hooted the boys clutched each other, expecting musket thunder. The farmer's cart, axles whining under burlap-draped passengers, creaked along sunken lanes where bandit legends grew thicker than moss. You rode up front, shoulder bound with linen that reeked of brandy and river slime, stiletto hidden beneath a heap of turnips. Each jolt jabbed pain through bone, but the sight of 8 ragged silhouettes huddled safe in straw kept you upright. By the third dusk La Rochelle's salt-stung breeze reached across tidal flats, and the harbor lamps winked like embers clinging to a dying log. Galleons bobbed at anchor, masts needling a saffron sky, as gulls shrieked warnings no one ever heeded. At Dock 7, Lizette's cousin awaited, Jean-Luc Rousseau, a barrel-chested smuggler whose beard smelled of cloves and cannon smoke. His brigantine Liberté loomed sleek and hungry behind him, canvas reefed for a night departure. "You the troubadour who broiled Versailles?" Rousseau rasped, eyeing the boys. "Thought you'd be taller. Thought freedom would be cheaper," you shot back. He barked a laugh, then counted heads. "Cabin's hold can hide 6, maybe 7 if we stack barrels tight. 8th'll bunk in my quarters." Nicholas volunteered, throat tight with newly learned bravery. Rousseau winked. "Fine lad. Knows port from starboard. He knows the value of a voice," you said. Moonrise painted silver onto the breakwater as sailors hustled crates aboard. Coffee beans, indigo, and 3 sealed casks that sloshed suspiciously heavy. You shepherded the boys down a companionway reeking of bilge and pine tar. In the lamplight their eyes shone, not with terror now, but with an astonished sort of hope, as though they'd stepped into a storybook illustration that miraculously hadn't turned into a cage. Only when the hatch clanged shut above did shock finally loosen their tongues. Marcel began humming a tavern reel. Remy joined in, drumming barrel hoops. Soon 8 thin voices braided into song, a chorus trembling on the edge of laughter. You slumped against a bulkhead, bones leaden, heart thrumming in time. For the first time since Gascony, you let tears spill, invisible in the dark. Somewhere overhead, lines snapped against spars, and Liberté glided from harbor like a knife sliding free of flesh. France, and every horror gilded by its court, receded into night-swallowed silhouettes. 3 days out, the Atlantic turned slate and sullen. Storm clouds stacked like siege towers, and wind moaned through rigging in a pitch that reminded you of Diana's tapestry corridor, those spoons clanging knock-knock pause knock. The sound tunneled you back to stone bars, ribbon welts, and the hollow stare of palace boys who'd never reached the riverbank. That night the sergeant who'd watched comrades drown burst from memory into reality, hauled aboard during a customs skirmish at Al-Darai. Rousseau chained him in the forward hold. The man's uniform dripped seawater and malice. When he spotted you, his lip curled. The regent never forgets. You lowered the stiletto to his throat, pulse steady at last. Neither do ghosts. Yet killing him seemed too swift, too silent. Instead you stripped his coat of rank, tossed it to the waves, and left him to contemplate a horizon he'd never intended to see. Storm surge hit at dawn. Waves hammered planks, boys retched brine in fear. Rousseau barked orders nobody could hear over wind cannon. You lashed Nicholas to a belaying pin, arms shielding Remy, salt spray igniting your wound. One rogue crest smashed the forecastle, sergeant, chains and all, into open water. He surfaced once, eyes wide with indignation, then the Atlantic closed its fist. By twilight the sea calmed, leaving Liberté wounded but afloat, sails ragged as beggars' flags. Rousseau clapped you on the good shoulder. Crew says you carry hurricane luck, troubadour. Care to stay on as purser when we reach Charlestown? Plenty o' pirates pay silver for a man who knows how to trade gold for silence. You glanced at the boys huddled under patched canvas, lullabied by waves. I'm done trading silence. He nodded, respecting a boundary no musket could enforce. Then we land, you take my dinghy upriver. Carolina woods are big enough to plant new names. Weeks blurred into gull cries, tar blisters, and constellations unspoiled by palace soot. You taught the boys to read the stars, how Orion's belt pointed west to futures untaxed by kings. They taught you songs plucked from soot-choked alleys behind Versailles, turning laments into sea shanties that even hardened sailors hummed on night watches. At last, land green as unripe olives rose on the horizon. Cypress trees clawed sky, draped in ghost-gray moss. Humid air tasted of pine resin and something electric, possibility. The dinghy nosed into a creek sided by reeds high as cathedral columns. Crickets tuned nature's orchestra, and a heron flapped away annoyed. You disembarked, boots sinking into loam as soft as unrolled velvet. Nicholas touched the earth, brow creased. Is this what freedom smells like? You inhaled mud, wildflowers, and wood smoke from a distant homestead. Closer, you said. A path wound inland. You took the lead, stiletto sheathed but ready, the boys trailing like fledgling constellations seeking a sky. Each carried something salvaged from the voyage. Marcel a dented compass, Remy a marlinspike worn like a knight's sword, Nicholas the silver chatelaine he'd pried from Rain-Evil's fallen cloak, a trophy transformed into a promise. Half a league in, the forest opened onto an abandoned hunting cabin. Roof sagged, but stone chimney stood proud. You crossed the threshold, splinters crunching, and felt something you hadn't since childhood, the hush of a place waiting to be named. Over fireplace soot you carved a single word with your dagger tip, sure, choir. Because here voices weren't cages or coins. They were maps, medicine, weapons. That night, flames crackled, fireflies blinked benedictions, and 8 once silenced boys sat in a circle, deciding who they wanted to become when no one was buying their obedience. Nicholas chose carpentry, Marcel map-making, Remy wanted to tame the heron and teach it to sing. They asked what you would be now that you were no longer their jailer, nor their fugitive guardian. You considered the Atlantic licking the shore like ink across blank parchment. A teller of truths, you decided, voice steady as tide. Someone must write what gold tried to erase. Sleep gathered them one by one. Outside, wind rattled cypress limbs, sound not unlike a spoon tapping stone, knock knock pause knock. Only now it was a memory, not a summons. You stoked embers, then unfolded a scrap of parchment pilfered from Rousseau's ledger. In charcoal you drafted the opening line of a chronicle the regent would burn every library to bury. This is the story of boys whose throats were gilded shut, and how their songs broke the cages built of crowns and coins. Ink would come later, presses later still. But truth had already slipped Versailles. It was here, crackling in firewood, drifting into starlight, rooting in Carolina soil. You signed the first page with the name the regent had carved on his wanted posters, Pierre Lafitte. Weak ink, perhaps, but loud enough when read in freedom's accent. Outside, dawn stirred. For once you didn't count heartbeats. You simply listened as 8 new voices woke to a world that had no price tag for their silence, and discovered, to their own astonishment, they could sing whenever they pleased.